Okay, so for my observations, so I'm trying to get at my research questions regarding like how teachers um, interact with students who have present challenging behaviors. So first, I did my unstructured observation in the classroom that I currently work in, which has predominantly 4 and 5 year olds, just to sort of get a picture of like what sort of presented itself, how the teachers sort of managed and engaged in the classroom, the types of play, and the sort of social cohesion that the children particularly had with one another. And so what I came away from that was that I wanted my structured interview, not my interview, my structured observation to sort of be guided by a few of the questions, sort of to make it so that I was being mindfully thinking of these things while I was going through it. So if you look at my methods memo, you'll see that the three questions that I had was rating how the teacher responded to student behaviors. It included like a rating scale, and also how many children seemed to have difficulties with task changes, because in reading up on some of the literature on challenging behaviors, it's clear that the majority of students who have problems with behaviors generally have issues, whether it's because of it's a disability or because their social development may be impaired, or they might have a developmental delay. They have problems with transitions. So what does this difficult thing of challenging behavior look like when you're sort of looking at it from that lens? And what are the different ways that the teacher sort of uses it? So the third question was, how do students interact during structured versus unstructured class time? So the time of day that I chose to observe was specifically this transition during the later part of the day, right before parent pickup. So school closes at about 5:30. So I was looking at the structure. What I consider structured is basically anything like a table activity, or there's circle time, which occurs right before this long period of gross motor time, which is basically playground time. Or during my structured observation, there was downstairs time in the gross motor room, which is a space that's available when outside is not available, because there was some pretty bad cold and rain this week. So that was a notable difference. So I guess the big takeaways that I got for this regarding how I'm going to approach this in my thesis is going to be looking at how these different questions. So I was looking at the different things of behavior, and when I was trying to write down what I was witnessing, what I was seeing is that teachers might have their own different personal definitions of what they consider to be challenging behavior, and that if I just use this sort of academic definition, which is, sort of defined as like any behavior that impairs a child's social and academic learning in any ways, but like a teacher might consider one thing challenging behavior and another thing not. So, for instance, is a common disruption is being loud, is a physical altercation, or not being able to socially communicate one's wants with another child if they have an issue using their words. Are those considered challenging behaviors, or are those just behaviors that require just giving those students a little extra support? So I guess in my interviews, I want to develop them so that I can get the teacher's thoughts on building not just the academic one-size-fits-all definition, but one that can take all of their sort of theorization of what that looks like into guiding my project as well. One thing that I noticed is that a lot of children who have a preferred playmate, particularly during structured playtime, tended to be more disruptive across both observations. The other one was that this is seen in like the childhood play, like play theory literature too, but the unstructured play, or basically the times that they would play games together, on both occasions oftentimes would veer into physical altercations. So this would be like whether it's tagging that turns to pushing, that turns to shoving, or pushing another friend down the slide. I was witnessing and making note of specifically how teachers interacted with them, how they shifted their tone of voice, and rated the quality of those interactions, at least during my structured observation, out of 5. And you can sort of see that on my memo, how I specifically scored all of those. I also made particular note of how often children required reminders or adhered to teachers' reminders to follow classroom directions or instructions. So I think that might be something that I might want to look at in creating, if it's like a more comprehensive structured observation form, is that I would want to see like have a way to sort of quantify or measure like how are teachers, what methods are they using? Are they pointing to a classroom sign that says like, we stand still, we catch a bubble in the hallway and we walk? Are they praising and differential enforcement, which is like they're praising the children who are doing something well, and then the other children sort of comply? Are they using 1, 2, 3 magic, which is this method where you say, all right, that's 1. If you get to 3, then you're all done with that activity, if they're throwing toys or whatever. And also, so that way, in my interviews, I sort of want that sort of the narrative that not narrative, but the way that the techniques that teachers are specifically using, I want to have a shorthand from the interviews so that when I do the field observations as the second component of my research, that I don't have to guess at what they're doing. I will have a label that I can use for coding to see, are all these teachers using the same methods? Are they using social stories to help guide these children through the classroom routine? Are they all using 1, 2, 3 magic? Are they all, how do they peer moderate when 2 children are fighting over a toy? So what types of play are there? How are teachers doing that? Getting a more standard definition of challenging behavior, and also whether this is working into the interview questions or not. Doing all 3 of those things while also noting what techniques and coming up with names for all of them, if they don't already have like a set name in the research literature for them, I think will help me create a more, based on my structured and unstructured observations, sort of help me create a more streamlined observation form that I can use to get the most kind of rich data out of my observations for the field work to kind of put in conversation with the interviews that I am planning on doing for my thesis. And that's what I sort of got out of this opportunity.